Thank you so much for coming to TECHFUGEES. Sit, relax, it's okay.
I've always spoken freely, Mike.
Oh, you have, of course.
Maybe that was my problem in government.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not an expert on French politics, so I couldn't possibly comment. What I wanted to talk about, so one of the things that you've been looking at recently is this sort of debate about immigration numbers. Now, immigration numbers are a big issue where I'm from in the UK, and it's kind of landed us in all sorts of problems around the discussion around Brexit. Nobody knows what's going on with immigration. There's a huge amount of confusion. Add to that the issue around refugees. It's kind of poisoning the whole discussion. And I think it's something that we as democratic countries have really got to start to deal with, isn't it? What do you think is going on right now in terms of that debate?
There's no debate on the data about immigration. It's a non-subject. I mean, I've tried myself to find some relevant, precise, open data. It's very difficult to find. Why are we addressing that subject now? We had elections a couple of months ago in France, and as you know, Marine Le Pen could have been elected as president of the country on extremist thesis and anti-immigration policies. Nearly one French person out of two was ready to support her. But what struck me at the time was that this was based on a kind of irrationality. It felt in France just as if the country had welcomed as many refugees as in Germany. And the reality was very, very far from that. It was 10 times at least, not even that, 20 times less than in Germany. But the political debate wasn't based on facts. And so I was in charge of opening data when a minister in the French government. And I looked at that subject from different angles. Climate, environmental data. It's a big, hot debated issue as well, but it's there on the table. The register of companies and enterprises, which has been open since then, for example. Should we open data for judicial decisions so that people can know exactly where, when, with what content judgment has been made in France? And so on and so on and so on. There's one subject which was absolutely never raised. It's immigration.
Why do you think that is then?
Because it's very sensitive, of course, and because there's a willingness to control information about the issue. But the result is that citizens, I believe, do not have access to the correct information in order to shape their own judgment about these issues. And so I think that the fact that there is so much opacity in accessing the information actually creates a counterproductive effect, which is people tend to become anxious and turn to extremes.
Why do you think it is that, and we've seen this in Britain as well, is that, you can continually tell people, look, there is not 1 million people coming to the country. There is, is a tiny, tiny number. In fact, it's appalling how badly our own government has behaved. In the UK, they put up a quota of 25,000 refugees. I mean, it's laughable. It's tiny. And yet, people can be so emotional about it. How do you think we can move people away from, move people into just looking at facts and like taking facts on board, and stop being so emotional about the subject, and actually look at hard data? How is it possible?
Do you live in London? You do,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
You're based in London. So do you have any clue of how many refugees came to live in your neighborhood in 2015?
Absolutely none. No idea.
We don't know what we're talking about. I think the French government last year was pretty brave in asking local towns and mayors to set up policies to welcome refugees. And so they had the representatives of the state had to face very strong resistance sometimes at the local level. Not always, but we do not have any information about where these people went, how many they were, what happened with them. We do have stories told by journalists, and it's great that they're doing their job of saying, you know what, actually, it's going perfectly well, and they've learned the language, and they're being very helpful to the community and very loyal as well, because they're happy to be there. But this is the journalistic approach, not the scientific one. And I've seen in my position the most fantastic technologies. High-tech companies hiring data scientists, using artificial intelligence technologies to produce semantics answers to some questions. And when you contrast that with the way the political debate is tackled when it comes to immigration, the gap is just not rational. And what I've tried to do, especially in the Digital Republic bill that was passed in Parliament last year, that was 1 year ago actually, was very based on opening information. So opening data by default, opening access to scientific studies published by researchers online, opening access to certain sensitive, specific data to researchers, and allowing them to merge some sets of data in order to have more precise research results, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this, again, contrasts so much with the Trumpish irrationality of the time. And I think in the end, we have to make a choice. What kind of information-based society do we want to choose?
You talk about transparency in the data. There is a sort of incentive for government institutions to do more transparency around data, isn't there? Because more transparency leads to better predictions, better, for instance, economic planning, all of those things. Is that something that is coming up as a subject more often now?
Oh yes, clearly, because we can see why opening data can be useful not only for democratic legitimacy reasons, but also because of the economic advantages. And once companies, startups have access to new sets of data, they can use them and produce innovative solutions. So this is, I think, but then I was very interested to see that the annual Open Data Hackathon that used to be organized in Washington every year didn't take place this year. Mm-hmm. And the guy who was behind the organization explained why, and he said, we have a president in the United States who has never been so much into opening data. So he passed a number of directives and instructions about we need to open data about immigration, in particular to let the American people know how many foreigners, they call them aliens, cross the border from Mexico. But then the American president is using the argument of transparency, legitimacy, to pass a political agenda that actually is pretty much opposed to what open data was aimed for in the beginning. So what I'm saying is that it's opening data just for the sake of it is, I don't think, the right solution.
You have to have a policy around it.
You have to have a policy around it. And so the civic tech people who are in this room must not only see the potential of digital technologies as tools, but as policies as well. What do we do with it?
Well, what do you think about the concept of so-called tech for good? So there's lots of, people will have say mapping or data or apps or whatever. What do you think about tech for good as a subject? Where's it going right as an idea, as a movement? Where's it going wrong? How can it be improved?
Well, that movement, I see it as a movement, is still emerging in France. I think it really comes from the Anglo-Saxon world and and the Commonwealth countries, actually. And also, there's also a strong Latin American culture around civic tech communities, but it's emerging very fastly in France because there's a bunch of entrepreneurs, young people, and not so young, willing to get involved in that and do good. Participate in society for the best, but also because there's a history, there's a sort of background of associative involvement throughout the country. And so if you add the knowledge around using the tools and technologies to that sort of historical characteristic of the country, then that creates a very good environment for tech, for good communities. But that being said, it's all nice and sweet. It raises two questions. What importance do public policymakers, again, give to that movement? What place do they take in the sort of official public policies? Are they just a small bunch of people that, we get to meet once in a year and discuss the world?
Pat them on the head, say, well done, Tech for Good.
I was very impressed by the initiative taken by the German government, actually Thomas de Maizière, and I disagreed with him on many subjects, but on that, he's the Home Affairs Secretary in Germany. And they drafted a report, an 80 pages long report on how his administration can work with the civic tech community to better welcome and integrate refugees in Germany. So, and this is very pragmatic and very concrete and offering a platform of solutions and empowering people. So it's not only the civic tech communities, it's really they're liaising with citizens to tell them, well, how can you get involved to make your country a better place? And so this kind of approach, I think, is very interesting. We're not there yet in France. The civic tech projects that I get to see are not that often linked to migration subjects, which is why I'm so interested in what TECHFUGEES is doing, because it's very new. It is a question to work on, but they're getting very good, the civic tech startups that I know, at developing solutions to help develop a better dialogue between the elected people, the institutions, and the citizens. So it's all about the democratic dialogue and how digital platforms, for example, can help improve it.
Do you feel that that we're going on the right track to get technology involved with this issue? Do you think that there's because it's about sort of scaling solutions to problems, or do you think that we have to kind of make sure that we keep our eye on the prize in terms of the actual sort of outcomes and as well?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think it's important to know from the start what we're trying to reach. President Macron was in New York for the United Nations General Assembly in September, and so this was the end of the year when France was presiding over the Open Government Partnership. We're discussing open data, open governance here. And I think it was very important during that year to put the tech for good and the civic tech involvement at the heart of the commitments of the various states and organizations that are members of the Open Government Partnership, because once this is done, it means it's going to last. It means it is part of the official goals set up by that international organization. So we're only at the beginning of the story. And it's also a lot about people understanding that they need to think tech ahead of initiating new projects. Because too often, and this is really something that I saw in government, we think, oh, we need to modernize this, or we need to reform that, and or let's do something new about that subject. And then we think how to implement it from a technological point of view at the end. That really changes the outcome. So I'm really in favor of putting the developers and IT architects together with the designers, with the public policy makers, with the engineers, and think
and the politicians.
and the politicians, even though I'm out of politics now. It's good sometimes to be out of politics as well. But that's what I mean when I say policy makers. It's really think of policies, but by integrating developers from the start.
Do you think there's some interesting movements? For instance, Estonia has this e-residency program, don't they? So you can become an e-resident of Estonia. Do you think that some of those ideas might leak into dealing with refugee issues?
Oh wow, that's very interesting. I never myself made that connection actually between the Estonian e-residency program.
But I mean, what I'm saying is,
and then
why aren't we handing someone a phone and an app and say, right, welcome, like here's all your information, here's your application, etc.
The idea behind it is state as a platform.
Yeah.
In order to empower people to have access to the right information, to control their own information, including their personal data, and be in a direct, interactive, efficient contact with the administration, and why not with the rest of their communities. In a country like France, which is originally very centralized, pretty bureaucratic, with a powerful administration, this is culturally speaking very different. But we're actually getting there. Slowly but surely. Yes, what we would need to create is a platform where refugees can have access to the right information and be put in contact with the people who could help them.
Right, agencies and what have you. Well, I must say, I wish we had the politicians like you in England right now. I must admit, we're having a few problems, as you might gather. But I just want to say thank you so much for supporting the TECHFUGEES Global Summit, coming and talking to us today. Axel Lemaire, thank you.
Thank you.